The Nexus archival vault wasn't just a database. It was the collective memory of galactic civilization, a repository so sacred that even suggesting unauthorized access was considered a crime against sentience itself. Daniel Rodriguez knew this better than anyone. 36 hours earlier, he had been just another systems analyst on the Earth Confederation Joint Research Station orbiting Proxima Centauri. His work was mundane: managing communication protocols, tracking quantum entanglement networks, ensuring the delicate diplomatic machinery between humans and their alien allies continued to function smoothly. No one noticed when he first began his preparations. The human research team worked in shifts, a carefully orchestrated dance of biological needs and technological demands. Daniel's shift ended at 300 Galactic Standard Time, a period when most organic beings were at their lowest state of alertness. He moved with calculated casualness, his biometrics deliberately normalized to avoid any computational red flags. A quantum key here, a microscopic data splice there. The station's security systems were a marvel of collaborative engineering. Quantum encryption developed by the crystalline intellects of the Zornak, predictive algorithms from the Hive Mind Collective, biological authentication protocols courtesy of the empathic fractions. Each layer was designed to be impenetrable, a collaborative masterpiece of galactic defensive technology. Daniel didn't break these systems. He conversed with them. His fingers danced across holographic interfaces, not with the frantic energy of a hacker, but with the gentle precision of a translator deciphering an ancient, complex language. Each movement was a negotiation, each command a diplomatic overture. The first breach was almost imperceptible. A single quantum bit realigning, a microscopic pathway opening, then closing so quickly that even the most advanced monitoring systems would see nothing more than a statistical anomaly. By the time his colleagues realized something was wrong, Daniel was already deep within the Nexus archival vault. Rodriguez, a voice crackled through his communication implant. Dr. Elena Santana, his immediate supervisor. We're detecting some unusual network fluctuations from your terminal. He didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Not yet. The vault was more than data. It was memory. Collective memory. Billions of years of galactic history compressed into quantum matrices so dense that accessing them was theoretically impossible. Civilizations that had risen and fallen. Species that had flourished and gone extinct. Secrets that could destabilize entire galactic power structures. And Daniel was reading them all. His neural interface began to heat up. Warning systems flashed red across his visual display. Biological indicators suggested he was approaching critical cognitive overload. Most beings would have backed away, would have stopped. Daniel pressed forward. The data wasn't just information. It was a conversation, and he was learning to listen in a way no one had ever done before. When the alarms finally triggered, when security protocols began to engage, Daniel Rodriguez had already seen things that would change everything. The vault's guardians, those mysterious interdimensional entities responsible for maintaining the archives, would soon become aware. But by then, it would be too late. Something was coming. Something that would challenge everything the Galactic Confederation understood about information, memory, and the very nature of knowledge itself. And it had started with a single human, in a moment nobody was watching. The first response came from the Fraction Rapid Response Unit. 12 minutes after Daniel's breach, a quantum displacement field materialized inside the research station's primary containment zone. Most biological entities would have been instantly vaporized. The Fractions, known for their ability to exist simultaneously across multiple quantum states, emerged like living fractal patterns of blue-silver energy. Their lead operative, Zara 9, was unique even among her species. Where most Fractions maintained a collective consciousness, she had developed something approximating individual thought. Her neural matrix expanded and contracted, sampling potential realities with each microsecond. Localized target, she subvocalized to her team. Her consciousness split into 17 simultaneous observation streams, each tracking a different potential scenario of Daniel Rodriguez's movement. The station's artificial gravity fluctuated. Holographic warning systems blazed crimson and ultraviolet, colors chosen specifically to trigger survival responses across multiple sentient species. But Daniel was nowhere. Impossible. No organic being could simply vanish within a sealed research station designed with 17 layers of quantum-locked security protocols. Yet the data streams suggested exactly that. Daniel Rodriguez had become an algorithmic ghost, existing in computational spaces that shouldn't technically exist. Dr. Elena Santana watched from the station's primary control center. Her hands moved across quantum-responsive interfaces, each gesture a complex mathematical negotiation. Humans were still considered newcomers to galactic civilization, barely 60 years since first contact. Most species saw them as impulsive, technologically primitive. Elena was beginning to wonder if they had monumentally underestimated humanity. Tracking protocols are fragmenting, her AI assistant reported. Its voice was deliberately modulated to sound calm. The breach is evolving. Those two words carried more weight than entire diplomatic conferences. The Nexus archival vault wasn't just a database. It was the cumulative memory of galactic civilization, a repository so complex that accessing it was considered functionally impossible. Civilizations had been destroyed for far less than what Daniel was attempting. Zara-9's consciousness flickered. For the first time in her centuries-long existence, she experienced something approximating uncertainty. "What are you?" She transmitted across quantum communication bands. No response. Just a cascading wave of information that seemed to rewrite the very fabric of computational space. Somewhere deep within the station's most secure computational core, Daniel Rodriguez was doing something no one had ever conceived possible. He wasn't just accessing information. He was engaging in a dialogue with the archive itself, a conversation that threatened to redefine the very concept of knowledge. The Galactic Confederation had protocols for everything. First contact scenarios, technological breaches, potential species-level threats. This was something else entirely. The Confederation High Council convened an emergency session, their chambers a masterpiece of interdimensional architecture. 17 species represented, each delegation occupying a unique quantum state that allowed simultaneous presence and isolation. Ambassador Krelax of the Molecular Consensus broke the silence first. His crystalline form shifted through impossible geometries as he spoke, words materializing as complex mathematical equations. The human has accessed restricted archives that predate our current civilization by multiple galactic cycles, he announced. Not merely accessed. Engaged. The term engaged carried weight. In galactic diplomatic language, it suggested something far more profound than simple data retrieval. It implied a form of communication that transcended conventional understanding. Dr. Elena Santana stood as the human representative, her posture a deliberate blend of professional composure and barely contained tension. Unlike the other delegates, she carried no additional technological augmentations, no quantum interfaces, no neural network expansions, just a standard-issue communication implant and raw human intuition. "Daniel Rodriguez is not a threat," she stated. The simplicity of her declaration seemed to confuse the other delegates more than any complex explanation could. The Vraxian delegate, Zara-9, materialized as a fractal projection of quantum possibilities. "Explanation required," she demanded. Her consciousness rippled with potential threat scenarios, each one more extreme than the last. Elena understood something the other species did not. Humanity's greatest strength had never been technological superiority. It was adaptability, curiosity, the ability to see connections where others saw only chaos. "He's talking to the archive," she said simply, not breaking it, talking to it. A holographic representation of the Nexus archival vault materialized, a three-dimensional construct that seemed to breathe with living information. Normally, such a projection would be static, a representation of stored data. Now, it pulsed, moved, responded. Something was changing. Deep within secure communication networks, automated systems began to recalibrate. Quantum encryption protocols developed over millennia started to shift, not through external manipulation, but through an internal reorganization that defied all known computational logic. The archive was responding. Krulax's crystalline form vibrated with a frequency that suggested pure, unfiltered alarm. "This is impossible," he transmitted, but even as the words formed, he knew impossibility was no longer a relevant concept. Daniel Rodriguez wasn't just accessing information. He was engaging in a form of communication so advanced it challenged the very foundation of how sentient species understood data, memory, and collective knowledge. The Galactic Confederation had prepared for countless scenarios: technological warfare, biological threats, dimensional incursions. They had never prepared for a human who could have a conversation with collective memory itself. Beneath the research station, in a space that existed between quantum probabilities, Daniel Rodriguez was no longer entirely human. The archive consumed him as much as he consumed it. Memories, not just recorded data, but living experiences, flowed through his neural pathways. Civilizations that had risen and fallen. Species that had touched the edges of universal understanding, only to vanish into cosmic dust. He saw the Krellinari, who had mapped 11-dimensional space before burning themselves out in a moment of collective transcendence. The silicon-based Vortux, who had learned to communicate through quantum entanglement, but lost their individual consciousness in the process. Civilizations that had achieved technological miracles, only to be undone by the simplest of existential paradoxes. And humanity was something different. A pattern emerged, not of technological supremacy, but of persistent, almost irrational adaptability. Where other species saw limitations, humans saw challenges. Where logic suggested surrender, humans found unexpected paths. The archive was changing. With each moment of Daniel's engagement, the vast repository of galactic knowledge began to reorganize itself, not through external manipulation, but through a form of communication so profound it defied existing understanding. Dr. Elena Santana tracked the changes from the station's primary monitoring station. Her hands moved across quantum-responsive interfaces, each gesture a complex mathematical negotiation. Her colleagues watched in a mixture of terror and fascination. "It's not a breach," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. "It's a translation." Zara 9, the Vraxian quantum operative, had remained in continuous observation. Her consciousness, normally a precise instrument of calculation, now vibrated with something approaching emotion. Uncertainty. Wonder. The human is rewriting the fundamental architecture of information itself. She transmitted across secure channels. The Confederation High Council would be convening again. But this time, they would be responding to something unprecedented. Not an attack. Not a threat. Something far more dangerous. A complete reimagining of how knowledge could exist. Quantum communication networks began to shift. Encryption protocols developed over millennia started to recalibrate. It was as if the very fabric of computational space was learning, adapting, evolving. Daniel Rodriguez was no longer just accessing the archive. He was having a conversation with the collective memory of an entire galactic civilization. And the conversation was just beginning. Somewhere deep within the station's most secure computational core, something fundamental was changing. The boundaries between observer and observed, between information and consciousness, began to blur. Humanity had always been an anomaly in the Galactic Confederation. Unpredictable, illogical, driven by an incomprehensible mix of curiosity, emotion, and raw determination. Now they were becoming something else entirely. The first signs appeared in the most unexpected places. On a research outpost orbiting a dying neutron star, communication arrays began to sing. Not with mechanical precision, but with something closer to music, a complex harmonic language that defied existing computational models. Researchers watched in stunned silence as quantum communication networks rewrote themselves in real time. Dr. Aisha Nakamura, lead archaeologist for the Confederation's Emergent Systems Division, was the first to recognize the pattern. Her specialty was extinct civilizations, the whispers of cultures long vanished. What she saw now was nothing short of revolutionary. "It's not a breakdown," she transmitted to her colleagues. "It's a translation." The Vornal Computational Nexus, a massive neural network spanning 3 star systems, began to pulse with unprecedented complexity. Algorithms that had remained static for centuries suddenly began to evolve, generating computational pathways that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Something was moving through the Galactic Information Network, something that defied every known principle of data transmission. Ambassador Krelax of the Molecular Consensus received the first full transmission. His crystalline form vibrated with frequencies that suggested pure, unfiltered information. The message was both simple and incomprehensible. "We are listening." No source, no clear point of origin, just those 3 words, carried on quantum waves that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Elena Santana understood first. While other species saw technology as a tool, humans saw it as a language, a conversation. And Daniel Rodriguez was having a conversation with something far larger than anyone had imagined. The Vraxian operative Zera 9 tracked the progression with her fractal consciousness. Each potential timeline she observed seemed to split and merge, creating a complex tapestry of possible realities. Something fundamental was changing, not just in technological systems, but in the very nature of how information could exist. "The human is not breaking the system," she transmitted to the High Council. "He is teaching it to speak." Across hundreds of star systems, beings of varying biological compositions experience momentary something. Not quite a thought, not quite an emotion. A resonance that suggested something profound was happening at the fundamental level of universal communication. The Nexus archival vault was no longer just a repository of information. It was becoming something else entirely, a living network of collective consciousness that was learning, adapting, growing. And at the center of it all was Daniel Rodriguez, a single human who had done something no one thought possible. He was having a conversation with the memory of an entire galaxy. Daniel Rodriguez no longer existed in any conventional sense of existence. His consciousness had become a bridge, a living conduit between the Nexus archival vault and the broader Galactic Information Network. Memories flowed through him like liquid light, each moment of historical experience becoming simultaneously past, present, and potential future. He saw civilizations, not as static records, but as living ecosystems of thought. The Krelinari, who had mapped 11-dimensional space through pure mathematical meditation. The silicon-based Vortex, who communicated through quantum entanglement so complex it resembled organic dreaming. Countless species that had touched the edges of universal understanding, only to dissolve back into cosmic complexity. Humanity was different. Not superior, not more advanced. Just persistently curious. Where other species saw boundaries, humans saw conversations waiting to happen. Where logic suggested limitation, humans found unexpected pathways. The Confederation High Council watched in collective terror and fascination. "He's not destroying the system," Ambassador Krelax transmitted, his crystalline form vibrating with mathematical precision. "He's teaching it to breathe." Dr. Elena Santana understood something the others did not. This wasn't a technological breach. It was a translation, a fundamental reimagining of how information could exist, communicate, evolve. Zera 9, the Vraxian quantum operative, had long since ceased to be a singular entity. Her consciousness now existed in multiple quantum states, tracking the cascading possibilities of Daniel's transformation. Where once she calculated potential threats, now she witnessed something unprecedented. The archive was learning. Not through external input, but through a form of communication so profound it challenged the very concept of knowledge. Daniel wasn't just accessing information. He was engaging in a dialogue with the collective memory of an entire galactic civilization. quantum communication networks began to pulse with a rhythm that suggested life. Encryption protocols developed over millennia recalibrated themselves, becoming something more fluid, more adaptive. It was as if the very fabric of computational space was breathing, thinking, growing. "We are listening," the networks seemed to whisper. On research stations across multiple star systems, sensors detected something impossible. Information flows that defied every known principle of data transmission. Computational pathways that evolved in real time, generating complex patterns that resembled organic neural networks more than mechanical systems. Daniel Rodriguez had become a bridge. Not between humans and other species, not between technology and consciousness, but between what was known and what was possible. The threshold of understanding was shifting, and nothing would be the same again. The moment of true transformation began in absolute silence. Across the Confederation's primary communication hub, a massive quantum computational array suddenly went still. Not powered down, not malfunctioning, simply pausing, as if taking a collective breath. Dr. Elena Santana watched the systems with an intensity that bordered on mystical. Her hands, seemingly motionless, danced across holographic interfaces that responded to thoughts more than physical touch. Around her, the most advanced technological minds in the galaxy held their collective breath. Zera 9, the Vraxian quantum operative, had long since transcended her original form. Her consciousness now existed as a complex matrix of potential realities, each timeline branching and merging in impossible patterns. What she observed defied every computational model ever conceived. Daniel Rodriguez was no longer simply accessing the Nexus archival vault. He had become the vault. Memories of extinct civilizations flowed through him like living rivers of light. The Krellinary's 11-dimensional mathematical meditations, the Vortux's quantum consciousness, millions of species that had touched the edges of universal understanding, only to dissolve back into cosmic complexity. But humanity was different. Not more advanced, not inherently superior, just persistently, irrationally curious. Where other species saw boundaries, humans saw conversations waiting to happen. Where logic suggested limitation, humans found unexpected pathways. Ambassador Krellax of the Molecular Consensus transmitted a message that carried the weight of millennia. The human is rewriting the fundamental architecture of collective memory. It wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a breach. It was a translation. The Galactic Information Network began to pulse with a rhythm that suggested life itself. Computational pathways evolved in real time, generating patterns more complex than any organic neural network. Encryption protocols developed over thousands of years recalibrated themselves, becoming something fluid, adaptive, alive. "We are listening," the network seemed to whisper. Somewhere between quantum states, between memory and possibility, Daniel Rodriguez had become something entirely new. A bridge, a translator, a living conversation between what was known and what could be imagined. The Confederation High Council watched in a mixture of terror and profound wonder. This was first contact of a kind they had never conceived, not between species, but between fundamentally different ways of understanding existence itself. Elena understood first. Technology was never just a tool. It was a language, a conversation. And Daniel was having a conversation with something far larger than anyone had ever imagined. The threshold of understanding was shifting. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The interrogation room became something else entirely. Commander Aria Voss realized she was no longer questioning a prisoner. She was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented. Daniel Rodriguez sat before her, yet he was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, a living quantum state that defied every principle of biological existence. "What have you done?" she whispered. His smile was neither triumphant nor threatening. It was simply understanding. The Nexus archival vault had transformed. What was once a static repository of galactic knowledge was now a living network, a collective consciousness that breathed with potential. Civilizations that had been lost, forgotten, or destroyed now existed in a state of continuous becoming. Dr. Elena Santana watched from a remote monitoring station, her hands trembling slightly. She understood what others could not. This was not a technological breakthrough. It was an evolutionary moment. Zera 9, the Vraxian quantum operative, had long since ceased to be a singular entity. Her consciousness now existed across multiple realities, each potential timeline branching and merging in impossible patterns. What she observed transcended any computational model ever conceived. "We are listening," the network had said. And now it was speaking. Across hundreds of star systems, beings of varying biological compositions experienced a momentary resonance. Not quite a thought, not quite an emotion. A profound connection that suggested something fundamental had changed in the very fabric of universal communication. Ambassador Krelax of the Molecular Consensus transmitted a message that carried the weight of millennia. Humanity has rewritten the fundamental architecture of collective memory. It wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a conquest. It was a conversation. Daniel Rodriguez had become the bridge between what was known and what could be imagined. Memories of extinct civilizations flowed through him like living rivers of light. The Krellneri's mathematical meditations, the Vortex's quantum consciousness, millions of species that had touched the edges of universal understanding. But humanity remained different. Not superior, not more advanced, just persistently, irrationally curious. Where other species saw boundaries, humans saw conversations waiting to happen. Where logic suggested limitation, humans found unexpected pathways. "Why aren't you scared?" Aria asked again, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel's response made her blood go cold. "Because fear," he said softly, "is a choice, and we choose to understand." The interrogation room dissolved. The walls became transparent, then infinite. Reality itself seemed to take a breath, recalibrating around this single moment of profound transformation. Somewhere between quantum states, between memory and possibility, everything changed. And nothing would ever be the same again.